Shalom, friends. Welcome to this shiur in Talmud. We're studying Masechet Berachot, that is tractate blessings. We're learning from the Talmud Bavli, the Koren Talmud Bavli edition by Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz of blessed memory. And as you can see, it's a very beautiful edition. We have the original text on the side. We have the translation and notes, and we have additional notes, pictures, photographs, illustrations, halakha, background, information about the various sages of the Talmud, and so on and so forth. There's a lot here to keep us going. As we work through the shiur, please feel free to look through the notes on the side as I'm reading and fill yourself up with all the additional points, or go through the shiur again and pay attention to those points, or of course, get hold of a copy yourself and work through the text by yourself as well. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet. My site can be found on www.lovingkindness.co. So we're on Berachot. We're on Daf Tet Vav Amud Beis. That's 15, side B. Every folio of the Gemara has two sides to it, side A and side B. That is the way that it was printed. And we're currently on side B. Now, we read last time a very interesting piece of Agadah, which dealt with the fact that there are three things in the world that are never satisfied. And the one thing referred to the grave, which is never satisfied. It keeps on asking for new customers. And also the womb of a woman who doesn't have children also continues to ask, well, when will I have my role enough? When will I be fulfilled? And then we learned that also, although not mentioned in the Gemara, the third thing is the earth that cries out and is never satisfied for water. And these are the three things that we discussed and the relationship between them. Now we continue on to a new section over here. And let us begin right away. Some fascinating, very beautiful Gemaras in front of us. Stay tuned, because you're not going to miss out, and you're not going to want to miss out on some of these beautiful teachings that we're going to get to very shortly. Tanei Rabbi Oshaya Kamei de Rava. Rabbi Oshaya taught in front of Rava. Ukesavtam. There is a verse in the Torah that says, and you shall write them. Everybody knows this verse. This is referring to the mitzvah of Mezuzot. We have to place Mezuzot on the doorposts of our homes on the right-hand side. 2/3 up the way, we need to place a Mezuzah, which consists of the first two paragraphs of the Keriat Shema. And this goes on all doorways of one's home, all doorways, not just the front door, all doorways, with the exception of any doors that are leading into places like a bathroom, a toilet, which are used for dirty or impure purposes. Of course, there are many halachot that apply to this. We're not discussing it. So the verse says, Ukesavtam, and you shall write them. Hakol biksav, everything should be written down, said Rabbi Oshaya in front of Rava. Avilet zavaot, even the commands, which means even the commands to write the Mezuzot down, that we're going to put them onto the doorpost of our homes, even the command itself should be written down. Amalei, he said to him, we're continuing our discussion. If you remember from before, this was a discussion we were discussing here. We see Rabbi Oshaya, we'd spoken about Rabbi Oshaya, and now we're speaking about Rabbi Oshaya. Rabbi Oshaya. And so Rava says back to Rabbi Oshaya, to Amalach Mani, the one who said this to you, who is he? Rabbi Yehuda. It is Rabbi Yehuda. Do Omar, that he said, Gabei Sotah, concerning the Sotah story. This relates to the woman who had been considered by her husband to have possibly been engaged in an adulterous relationship, and she'd been warned about it. So the husband, so to speak, accuses her now of engaging in this forbidden relationship, and she must go to the Beis HaMikdash, and she must go through a process to qualify whether or not she was in fact engaged in this promiscuous relationship, and whether she's going to be deserving of the punishment due to the Sotah waters. So concerning the Sotah story, Alot Kotev, regarding the Sotah curses, it is written over there, Tzavaot Eino Kotev. But with regards to writing down the actual commandments, that you should write down that they should be written down. You mean you've got to write it down. You have to write down certain things which then have to be erased. So writing all these things down, you should write down what's necessary, but you don't have to write down the commands that you have to write it down. Whereas with ukasavtam, you've got to write down the command also. V'hasam hudiksiv, and there it's written, v'kasav es ha'alos ha'ele, and he shall write these curses. Aval hacha, but here in our case, we're speaking about the Mezuzot, diksiv, it's written, ukasavtam, and you shall write them. What does the word them have to add to the story? Because with regards to the Sotah just says, it just says, it just says, write down the alot. It does not say ukasavtam. Implication, you don't have to write the command to do the writing of the Sotah when you write down the Sotah curses, or the Sotah, all the things that go into it. However, for the Mezuzah, you need to include the command inside the writing. It is part of the verse itself. Even the commands must be written down in the text itself. It is insufficient just to write the paragraph without including the command to write it in. Atu taimei de Rabbi Yehuda. Is this to say that the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda is mishum diksiv? It's because it's written, the kasav, and he shall write it. Taimei de Rabbi Yehuda. The reason is of Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda is the one who's making the statement up over here. We said over here, who was it that said the statement is Rabbi Yehuda? The reason is, Taimei de Rabbi Yehuda, mishum diksiv, because it's written, alot. Look at the word. It just says the curses. Alot, in, yes. With regards to the curses, in the Aramaic, the word in is not the same as the Hebrew word ein, as in, even when you pronounce in the Aramaic, you could also pronounce it as ein if you wanted to, although generally it's pronounced as in. Well, ein doesn't mean there is not, but in Aramaic it means yes, yes, it is so actually. So alot, in, the curses, yes. Savaot, no. But with regards to the commands, no. That's a very interesting idea. Let us read the note over here. If that is Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning, there is no reason to derive the requirement to write the commands from the phrase, and you shall write them, in the case of the mitzvah of Mezuzah. Derive it simply from the fact that the Torah did not distinguish between the various components of the portion. Itzrik, the Gemara answers and says, no, we need it. We need the verse to say, ukasavtam, and you shall write them. Salkedaitach amina, it should enter your mind to say, because you'll say the following. Neilav kesiva mehasa. We would say like this, let us derive the idea of writing from there. What does writing from there mean? In Gemara language, this is an expression which is known as a gezerah shava. A gezerah shava is comparing one thing to another, that when we see a particular thing in the Gemara relating to one particular scenario, and we have another scenario which has a very similar line of thought to it, we can use the scenario of the previous section to relate to the scenario that we're speaking about now and join the two together. If we could say the one thing about the one, we can also say the other thing, the same thing, about the other also. How does that work? Ma hasam, just as it is over there, alot in, there we write the curses, yes. Tzavaot lo, then when it comes to the commands that you don't write, af hachanami, so too over here also, tzavaot lo, you wouldn't have to write the curses. In other words, the curses are not to be written. Kasav rachmana, therefore the Torah says, ukasavtam, which means to say, afilu tzavaot. We could learn the opposite way around. If in the other case, you could have learned that you have to write it down. So in this case also, you could say write it down. But the fact is that in this case, it just says tzavaot. It just says, but you can write tzavaot, no. But to write down the actual commands themselves, that you're commanded to do it, that you don't have to do. How do we know that? That's why the Torah says, ukasavtam. Over there, in the Mezuzah, it is not sufficient just to write what is necessary, but afilu tzavaot. Even the commands must be written down. Let us take a look over here at the background information, verbal analogy, Gezerah Shava, a fundamental Talmudic principle of biblical exegesis appearing in all the standard lists of hermeneutical principles. If the same word or phrase appears in two places in the Torah, and a certain law is explicitly stated in one of those places on the basis of verbal analogy, it is inferred that the same law applies in the other case as well. Certain restrictions were placed on the use of this principle to prevent unfounded conclusions from being drawn. Most significantly, one cannot infer a verbal analogy on his own, i.e., only a verbal analogy based on ancient tradition is valid. So the discussion that was going on here is, if in the case of the tzavaot, the commands related to the Sotah, we see over there that only the commands had to be written down, but not the actual command to write them down. Whereas in the Mezuzah, it is not sufficient just to write the commands about the Mezuzah, but one has to write the actual, not just the mitzvah, but you have to write the command that we were commanded to do the particular writing itself. And so we learn this from the Gezerah Shava the other way around. In order to understand the concept, we needed both explanations to teach us. That if you thought that you could use the same logic and say, but in the one case, you did indeed have to write down all of the commands as well as the mitzvah, so too in the other case, you also need to do it. But in this case, we learned that's why Rabbi Yehuda came to teach us the additional case of the Sotah, to say to us that with regard to the Sotah, the principle of ukesav, of writing, does not apply in the same way to the Sotah as it did to the Mezuzah. In the Mezuzah, we write down the command, ukesav tama Mezuzot v'sefer v'shtarecha, and we do the mitzvah itself. Whereas in the case of the Sotah, we only write the commands, but we do not. We only write the curses themselves. We do not write the commands that we have to write down those curses for this mitzvah of administering these Sotah waters. Tane Rav Ovadia Kamek the Rava. Rav Ovadia taught in front of Rava a new teaching, V'limadatim, and you shall teach them to your children. V'limadatim osamis b'neichem, as we read in the Keriat Shema. What does this mean? It means that your learning or your teaching should be perfect, tam, complete. That there should be a space, give a space between things that are joined. Now, what is it talking about? Well, if you remember from back in our Mishnah, when we were learning the halakha with regards to reading the Keriat Shema, we learned a halakha that related to being very careful about the letters that we recite in the Keriat Shema. We must be very precise in the letters that we say. And there were differences of opinion, as we learned before. And there were some that said, if you're not careful with the letters, you fulfill the obligation. And there were some that said, if you are not careful with the letter pronunciation, you do not fulfill the obligation. Now, in connection with that Mishnah, we continue the story. The story goes that the verse says, V'limadatim. Why does it say, and you shall teach them? You should read the word differently. Read the word as limaid tam. It should be taught perfectly, completely. What's the analogy? What's the story behind it? The story is sheyitain revach bein ha'devakim. When a person is reciting the Keriat Shema, he needs to put pauses between words that join together. On a Rava Basrei, Rava answered after him, Kagon, for example, Al levavecha. Do you hear what I said? Al levavecha. Upon your heart. What's the problem? Because if I pronounce the words and I'm reading it very quickly, like many people do, I say like this, and it shall be al levavecha, on your hearts. Well, al levavecha is not what it says. It says al levavecha, upon your heart. You see, the lamed, which is the last letter of the word al, is the same letter that appears as the first letter of the next word. Therefore, Rav Ovadia is teaching in front of Rava that the idea of this expression, v'limadatim, is to teach us when you recite these words that the one word ends with the letter that the next word begins with. Place a space between the two words so that the expression that you are using is one which is perfect. Al levavecha. Al levavchem. Not al levavchem. This is not correct. It is not one word. Al levavchem. It is al levavchem. Bechol levavcha. With all your heart. Bechol levavcha. Not bechol levavcha. There is no such a word as bechol levavcha. No such a word. It is bechol levavcha. You have to love Hashem bechol with all, levavcha with all your heart. Bechol levavchem. No. Bechol levavchem. Esev b'sadcha. Not esev b'sadcha. Even though the bait here is pronounced as a vait and it doesn't have a dot in it, it could still be that a person might confuse it almost and say esev b'sadcha. Esev b'sadcha. Almost like it's one word, because it's still a bait and a bait. Be careful. Esev, the grass, b'sadcha, in the field, in your field. Va'abadatem mehira, and you shall be destroyed quickly. It is not va'abadatem mehira. This is not correct. It is va'abadatem mehira. Why would a person make the mistake? Because the one word ends in the same letter that the next word begins with. Therefore, v'limadatem, you shall teach them, you shall instruct them, you shall learn it, you shall involve yourself in it in a way of perfection. Tam, pronounce the words clearly. All of one's davening should be in a way that one pronounces one's words clearly. Hakanaf pasil. On the corner, you're going to put a thread of blue, patil techeles, of this techeles thread. Hakanaf pasil, not hakanapsil. There's no such a word, hakanapsil. And again, the pei sofit is the same letter that is the next letter, even though the pei is really pronounced as a fei, and then the next word is pronounced as a pei. But still, nevertheless, a person could confuse it. And he could say, hakanapsil. But it's not hakanapsil. It's hakanapsil. Eschem me'eretz. You from the land. Not eschem me'eretz. There is no such a thing. Therefore, when pronouncing all of these words in the Keriat Shema, it is brought down clearly in halakha that one must indeed pause between these words and pronounce them beautifully. Those of you who have quality sidurim in your possession, open them up onto the Keriat Shema, and you will notice something very interesting about the Keriat Shema especially. You will notice that certain letters have stars above them, asterisks, and some words you will see have lines between two words. Take note of how the Shema is written in your beautiful modern Siddur, and you will note that the publishers of the Siddur have taken into account the halakha that pertains to this very Gemara. For example, when you see a straight line that is separating between two words, the publisher put that in for our purposes so that we would know to make a pause between the two words. When we see an asterisk that appears on top of a letter, it is usually to tell us and identify for us that we must pronounce that letter, and not that the letter is swallowed up, but that it is pronounced, especially when we come across the rules of shvana and shvanach. The shva is the vowel that looks like two dots, like a colon, and if it has, when it appears at the beginning of a syllable, then we pronounce it as a shva. However, when it appears at the end of a syllable, we don't pronounce it. It is almost just like the letter is swallowed up in itself, but we don't make it pronounced. But sometimes it's confusing. When is the beginning of the syllable? When is the end of the syllable? So if you have a modern siddur and you open it up into the Keriat Shema, you will see that there are asterisks that appear on top of the letters that should be pronounced. And then if the letter shouldn't be pronounced, you'll see that there's no asterisk. When you see a line dividing between two words, you will know that the publisher has placed that line there for a purpose to warn us to keep the two parts separate. Al levavchem. Al levavchem. Eschem me'eretz. Not eschem me'eretz. It is not one word. It is two words. Each word must be pronounced exactly as it is written. Take a look here at the halakha. One should leave space between adjacent words. When reciting the Shema, one must be precise in his enunciation and create separation in cases where the last letter of the first word and the first letter of the second are identical, brought down in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. Check it out yourself. Hakanaf Pesil. What is this exactly about? Failure to distinguish between the last syllable of one word and the first syllable of the next is easily understandable in words like al levavecha. However, it is a bit surprising with regards to hakanaf pesil, as the pay at the end of the first word is soft and the one at the beginning of the second is hard. Apparently, at least in certain places within Eretz Israel and without, there was no clear distinction between the pronunciation of hard and soft consonants, and certainly there were places where the soft consonants were read as though they had a dagesh. Leni, I'm not sure what that is, dagesh. As is the practice in certain Jewish communities today, or perhaps both were read as soft consonants, as appears to be the case in the Jerusalem Talmud, where both the soft and the hard bait are used interchangeably with the letter Vav. Okay, behind the scenes, that's what's going on. Nevertheless, we are careful to pronounce even the pay and the fay so that we shouldn't combine the two, lest accidentally we make it sound like it's going to be one word. Let us continue. Omar Rabbi Chama b'Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Chama. It says Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Chanina, Kol harukoire Keriat Shema. Anybody who reads the Keriat Shema, and he's very precise in the letters, he's very careful, he says, Bechol levavecha. He doesn't say Bechol levavecha. Mitzanenin lo Gehenum. The fires of hell, of Gehenum, are cooled down for him. How come? Because since he cooled himself down, so to speak, he was in a rush, he was in a hurry to finish Keriat Shema, but he didn't. He held himself back and he pronounced each word as it said, slowly and carefully. He held himself back, he cooled himself down. He could have easily have read the words in a hurry with great spirit and fire, but because he was slower in pronouncing the words, therefore he merits midah keneged midah, that the fires of hell will be cooled down for him when he enters into the next world. Shene'emar, how do we know that? Because the verse says, B'fareis Shaddai melachim ba tashlei b'tzalmon, which means when the Almighty scatters B'fareis, kings, over it, it will snow in Talmud. Says the Gemara, how can you learn out this concept from this verse? Al tikri b'fareis, don't read the word as when he scatters, ela, but read it as b'faresh, which means to say that he enunciates. He is saying it b'peirush. He's saying it in a very clear manner. Al tikrei b'tzalmon. Don't say that it's going to. Don't say that it's going to. It will snow in Tzalmon, but say ela b'tzalmavet, in the shadow of death, in Tzalmavis, which means to say in the world to come, there the snow will come about. When it's so hot that the pain of the embarrassment, whatever it is that a person goes through, Rahman al-Itzlan, in the next world, under the punishment for certain things that he might have done wrong, but they see over there that when he recited the Keriat Shema, he did so slowly. Immediately, with all this heat going on and this embarrassment that he's feeling, this pain that he's feeling, they put on, so to speak, the snow. The snow are the words that he recited of the Keriat Shema, which act as a means to cool down the fire of Gehenna. Let's take a look at what it says here on the note. The Phares, when the Almighty scatters kings, even if due to his transgressions, he is punished with the torment of Gehenna. His punishment will be eased because he was meticulous in the performance of mitzvahs, says Rav Hai Gaon. The homiletic interpretation of the verse is as follows. B'farei Shakai, when he enunciates the portion in which the kingdom of God is mentioned, Melachim Ba, the place where all the heathen kings are located, Tashleik B'tzalmon, Gehenna will be cooled. The Gemara needed to emphasize that B'tzalmon in this verse does not refer to mere darkness, as there is no significant connection between snow and darkness. Instead, B'tzal Mavis, in the shadow of death, is understood to refer to Gehenna, which is enveloped in absolute darkness. Commentary here for Rabbi Yoshaya Pinto. We continue. Rabbi Chama said in the name of Rabbi Chanina, we're seeing here that Rabbi Chama is teaching us a number of teachings that he learned. Rabbi Chama the son of Rabbi Chanina, is teaching us another teaching. And the Gemara is about to go on to Daf Tet Zayin Amud Aleph 16a. Lama nismachu ohalim lenechalim. Why are these two words joined together? Ohalim, which means tents, to nechalim, which means streams, referring to a verse that we're about to read. Where's the Gemara? What's the Gemara speaking about? The Ksiv has written, Ki nechalim nitayu keganos alei nahar, ka ahalim nata, which means as streams stretched forth, like as gardens by the riverside, as aloes, which are the ahalim, are planted. And this continues by the Lord, the seed is by the water. Lo malaka comes to teach you what? Ma nechalim, just as it is that the streams, ma'alin esa adam mituma letahara, it lifts up a person from impurity to purity. Af ohalim ma'alin esa adam mikaf ova lekaf zgut. So to do the tents. Here there's a pun on the words ahalim. It is not ahalim as in the aloes, but read it instead as ohalim, tents. So to the tents of Torah, where a person studies Torah. At home, when a person is sitting in his room and he's listening to the shiur, he is in the tents of Torah. Of course, in the old days, and especially at the times when you weren't involved with big viruses and things like that, well, people would sit in the base midrash and study. Of course, people are studying in the base midrash today as well. But even if a person is not in the base midrash, his tent of Torah is his bedroom, maybe, or his study. It doesn't make a difference where he is. That is the tent of Torah. He sits with his stender and his table in front of him. He puts his book and he is in the tent of Torah. Af ohalim ma'alinisa adam mikafova lekafskus. So too, the tents of Torah, when a person is involved in the study of Torah, it uplifts a person from the side of debit, of chovah, of being liable for something, to the side of merit. Just as it is that water, the stream, purifies a person when he immerses in the stream. He goes under the water like a mikvah. He immerses in the stream of water, and even though he was in a state of impurity when he entered the water, but when he comes out of the water, the stream purifies him. This is the mystery behind water. What water does to the body, to the soul, is it purifies it. It has two factors to it. The water cleans a person physically, and on a spiritual level, when water is dealt with in a natural state, or for example, rain falls into a ditch, into a large open area, and it is untouched by human hands according to the laws as the Torah dictates to us, and it becomes a mikvah of water. Then when a person immerses in this particular pit of water, then the water purifies him spiritually. He immerses himself completely naked without any intervening substances. When he comes out of the water, he is pure. The Torah does the same thing to a person. The Torah study does the same thing. When we sit and we learn the words of Torah, we are purifying ourselves. When we recite the words of Torah, we are purifying our mouths, we are purifying our eyes, we are purifying our ears, we are purifying every part of our body as we engage in the study of Torah. When we engage in ordinary activities, well, it depends what we're engaged in. If there's certain activities that are necessary, well, that's fine. We need to do those things. When it is certain things that are unnecessary, which means that go against the values of Torah, well, of course, we have distanced ourselves from that very source that purifies ourselves. So this is what we're speaking about over here, that the water of the stream or the study of Torah is comparable to the stream of water. Take a look at the note over here. Most commentary explain that the word ohalim here is not the word that appears in the verse as value stretched forth, as the word is ahalim and refers to a type of fragrant plant. Rather, the reference is to the adjacent verse, how good are your tents, Jacob, Ohalecha, Jacob, your dwelling places, Yisrael. In that context, Ohel is generally understood as referring to the tense of Torah. Well, whichever way we look at it, the bottom line is the same teaching is really coming out of this principle that we're learning over here, is that just as it is that water purifies ourselves when we immerse in the water, we must not forget that the words of Torah purify ourselves in the same way. The Gemara continues now into the next section of our Mishnah. Hakoire lemafreya lo yatsa. A person, if you remember back to our Mishnah, a person who reads the Keriat Shema out of order, this could mean that he reads it backwards, or backwards to the front, third paragraph to the second paragraph, or let's say backward sentences. He does everything upside down. Lo yatsa. He does not fulfill his obligation. Let us see exactly what this means. Therefore, it says, one who recited and erred should return to the place of Shema that he erred. Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi. A story is told. This is the Agada section of the Talmud. We've dealt with some serious halakha and serious halakhic matters related to how to recite the Keriat Shema, when we could recite the Keriat Shema, what is the earliest time, and so on and so forth. And now we come to an exciting story in the Talmud to teach us something about love. Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi. That's the story. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi havu ka kotrin le ganana le Rabbi Elazar. With a story. These two rabbis were busy tying the wedding canopy for Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar was getting married, and these two honored rabbis, who were great men themselves, took a great part in bringing simcha to the Khatan by preparing the wedding canopy for him. Omar lahu, he said to them, Adahachi v'hachi, meanwhile, while you guys are busy, Aziel, hope you don't mind, he said to them, I'm taking some time off. I'm going. The Ishma Milta Devei Midrasha. I haven't got time to waste. I'm getting married. You want me to sit and watch you while you tie the wedding canopy? I've got things to do. Haven't got time to just sit and watch you prepare this canopy. So he says, hope you don't mind. I'm going to go off and I'm going to hear a word in the base midrash. Let's see what they're learning. The AC, and I'll come, the Ema Lahu, and I will say to you, which means to say, let me go off, I'll hear what they're saying in the base midrash, and whatever good news I hear, some nice Torah, nice section, juicy section of Torah, while you guys are busy preparing here and you're involved in this mitzvah and you've taken away from Torah study, I'm going to listen to some Torah and I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you guys some beautiful ideas in Torah that I'm learning in the base midrash today. Azal, he went, Azriche Netana, and he found there was a Tana there. Somebody was teaching. The Katane Kamei de Rabbi Yochanan. And he happened to be teaching in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Now look here on the side, the background. Katrin Genana, he was tying a wedding canopy. In Talmudic times, a chuppah was not merely a canopy spread over the couple, but a room in which the couple was secluded. Therefore, it was necessary to devote a considerable amount of time to its preparation. There's an ancient tradition that the custom in Judea was to plant a cedar at the birth of a son or an acacia tree at the birth of a daughter. When the children were to be married, branches would be taken from the trees in order to construct the chuppah. It is conceivable that they were doing the same for Rabbi Elazar. Anyhow, the story continues, and he's in the base midrash, and he's hearing somebody teaching a teaching in front of Rabbi Yochanan. It was a Tosefta he was teaching. He said the following: Kara, a person was reading, V'ta'a, and he made a mistake, which means he was reading the Keriat Shema, and he made a mistake while he's busy reading. Here's the teaching that he heard. Ve'eno yodeh lehekan ta'a, and he does not know where he made a mistake. Was busy reading, and he just lost track of where he was. You know, it can happen to anybody. Perhaps it even happened to you once or twice. You were busy reciting, happened to me, reciting Keriat Shema, and just thinking a thought suddenly goes through a person's mind, and he wonders, where in the world am I? Oh, I'm reciting the Keriat Shema. Well, I thought I was at the Machane Yehuda marketplace. Now I realize I'm actually davening the Keriat Shema, acknowledging the unity of God. Let me get back to what I was saying here, some important matters. If a person is in the middle of the chapter, he should return back to the beginning of the chapter, which means if he loses his place while he's in the middle of the paragraph, let him return to the beginning. Remember when we started the discussion? We said if we read the Keriat Shema out of order, so then you have to fix yourself up because you're not allowed to do that. You aren't allowed to read the Keriat Shema out of order. So now the Gemara is discussing different scenarios of what could take place that could make one liable for losing one's place while one is reciting the Keriat Shema. So what happened to him? In the middle of the paragraph, he loses track of where he's at. Said this Tana in front of Rabbi Yochanan, Yachazol Larosh, you know what? He should return back to the beginning of the paragraph. What of the following scenario? Bein perek leperek. If a person was between one paragraph and the other, what should he do? Yachazol leperek rishon. Let him return back to the first chapter, which means to say he doesn't know where he's at. Am I in paragraph 1, paragraph 2, or paragraph 3? He catches himself out and he knows that he's finished one of the chapters, but he's not sure where he is. So he says over here, let him return back to the first chapter. Ben kesiva leksiva. What about if a person is busy reciting the word kesiva, writing? Everybody knows that the word kesiva, writing, appears in paragraph number 1 and paragraph number 2. Well, he doesn't know exactly which ketiva he is in. Is he in the first paragraph or is he in the second paragraph? And that's very easy to become distracted. And the person thinks to himself, he's busy reciting off by heart and he's saying it so quickly, he doesn't know whether he's in the first paragraph or the second paragraph, speaking about the mitzvah of the Mezuzah. What should he do? He should turn back to the first kesiva. He should assume that he's still in the first paragraph. He shouldn't assume that he's in the second paragraph. If he assumes he's in the second paragraph, it could be that he'll continue davening and he'll have left out an entire paragraph. Whereas if he assumes that he's in the first paragraph, at least even if he has to repeat it, at least he'll be saying the Keriat Shema in full. Omar le Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan answered the Tana, and he said to him, Lo shanu. They didn't say this. Ella, but only with regards to shelo patach b'leman yebu yemechem. We're talking about a case that a person had not yet recited the words leman yirbu yemechem, which then appear in the second paragraph after ukasav tama mezuzot beisecha v'sharecha. Once you say leman yirbu yemechem, once you say that, you're acknowledging to yourself that surely you must be already in the second paragraph. But once a person says these words, in order that your days will be lengthened, it must be that he is in his ordinary manner of behavior and he's continuing that way, and so he should indeed continue with the second paragraph. So that is a practical point in mind. A person says, and then he says, hold on a second. Maybe I'm at the first Ukisaftam. Maybe I'm at the second. I don't know where. No problem. Because once he's already said Laman Yebuya Meichem, he acknowledges that indeed he is in the second paragraph, and we don't have to be skeptical that maybe he's still in the first paragraph. The story, the Agadah, continues. Asa v'amar lehu. Rabbi Elazar came and he said to the two rabbis who were preparing the wedding canopy for him, Amarulei, they said to him, in other words, he told him the story, what he heard in the Beis Midrash, just like he promised. He came back and he told them the good news about this beautiful halakha that he'd learned, fantastic. A Torah scholar, it doesn't matter what he's doing, he wants to be studying Torah. So he's getting married, a big deal. Meanwhile, I need to study some Torah, whatever he's doing. The language of the Chachamim all the time should be listened to by whoever happens to be around them, because the language that they speak is a godly language. It's a language of Torah all the time. They don't part from the words of Torah. They don't part from God. They're connecting with God all the time. They're not talking about foolish things. They're not talking about silly matters. They're not talking about the current news of the latest story happening in the latest soap opera on television that everybody needs to be aware of. The news that they're sharing are words of life, words of Torah. And so therefore we see that even when Rabbi Elazar had gone off, he was getting married, still nevertheless, he went off and he carried on studying Torah. And when he comes back to the rabbis who are engaged in the mitzvah, he doesn't stop talking words of Torah. That is the nature of a real Torah scholar. He cannot hold himself back. That is what must come out of his mouth all the time. Beautiful words, words of kindness, words of intellect, intelligence, wise words, and words that help and encourage others. That is the nature of the Torah scholar. Asar, Amaluhu, Amarle, so they said to him, Ilulo Banu, if we had not come to do this wedding canopy for you, Ela Lishmua Davazeh. And the whole purpose that we came for this whole thing was just to hear these fantastic words, Dayenu, it would have sufficed. And the rabbis answered back to Rabbi Elazar and they said, thank you so much for sharing these words of Torah. You know, we were so busy building this, preparing this canopy for you. We were so involved in it that we thought, what are we wasting our time for maybe? Well, we were involved in all this. And you came and you shared these beautiful words of Torah for us. Wow, you know, it was great for us to be a part of your wedding. But if we come here and we hadn't taken a part in this wedding after all, and all we came here for was to hear these words of Torah from you, that would have been something special in itself. And so that's what they said. Let us continue into the next Mishnah. Masnisin, this is our Mishnah. Ha'umanim, workers, Koren Barosh Ha'ilan, they should read the Keriat Shema at the top of a tree, or Barosh HaNidbach, or at the top of a concrete wall, which means to say they're working. Once they're working, what does the worker do? He cuts down things off a tree. You know, a laborer is involved in all sorts of activities. Especially in those days, he wasn't sitting behind his computer all day typing out programs. He wasn't answering messages on his email, on his cell phone. He was busy working as a laborer, involved in all sorts of agricultural activities, hard physical activities, or everybody was involved in this type of work. Well, in any case, even if one wasn't, the Mishnah still applies. If one was hired to do something at the top of a tree, he's taking down fruits from the tree, he's picking the fruits, or he's cutting down the branches, or whatever it is, and he's ascended to the top of the tree, he should read the Keriat Shema right then and there at the top of the tree. Oberosh HaNidbach, also, if he's on a concrete wall, he's busy building something, he doesn't need to come down. He should recite the Keriat Shema right there. Which is not what they should do. They don't have permission to do it with regards to davening, which means to say with the Shemona Israel. So at this point in time, the Mishnah is teaching us that for reciting the Keriat Shema, one can do it at the top of the tree, and one can do it at the top of this wall, the stone wall, whatever it is that he's building. But when it comes to tefillah always means Shemona Israel, real prayer that we need to concentrate and speak to God. Well, we can't concentrate and speak to God at the top of a tree or on the top of a wall. We're balancing on top of this wall, you know, we're shockling a little bit, could even fall down. We're not going to be able to concentrate so well. Fine. Second part of the Mishnah. Chatan patur mi Keriat Shema laila harishona. The Mishnah continues. A katan, a groom, is exempt from reciting the Keriat Shema on the first night that he gets married. It means to say, he gets married, that night is a mitzvah night. He is going to be engaged in a very unique mitzvah, and this mitzvah should be his first and only time that he has the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah in the way he's about to fulfill the mitzvah. And because of this, therefore, he is exempt from reciting the Keriat Shema on that first night. Because, of course, as we know, general principles, a person who is engaged in one mitzvah is exempt from another mitzvah. And the Gemara will discuss various parts as to how this relates practically. But in the meantime, the Mishnah is quite clear to us that one who gets married should not recite the Keriat Shema on the first night of his wedding, on the first night of the marriage. V'ad motza'ei Shabbos. In fact, he should not recite the Keriat Shema. I don't know what this means, if it means all the time, daytime and nighttime, or just the nighttime. I'm not quite sure what this means. But in the meantime, on the surface level, the Mishnah is teaching us, even until Shabbos comes out, im lo asa ma'aseh, if he did not yet do the deed. The Mishnah, of course, is speaking in a very clean manner without specifying exactly what's going to happen. Everybody knows what's going to happen. And the Mishnah tells us if he has not yet completed the deed that he has to do, this one unique mitzvah that should be the first time that he is about to engage in this mitzvah. And of course, he will never have this real opportunity to engage in this mitzvah to the fullest extent possible, except on this particular occasion, which is the most unique, unless, of course, something happens, God forbid, in the marriage, and again, he has to marry a woman who is a basula, and so on and so forth. We're not getting into that. A story happened, story time. Once again, we go back to the Agadah. A story happened with Rabban Gamliel. Shenasa Isha, he married a woman, the Kara Laila Harishona. And he read the Keriat Shema on the first night that he got married. This is crazy. Rabban Gamliel, the great Rabban Gamliel, who even taught over this halacha, he himself recited the Keriat Shema on the night that he got married. Amrulo Talmidav, so his students said to him, Limadatanu Rabbeinu, but didn't our teacher teach us? Didn't you teach us, Rabbi? Shechatan patur mikriyat Shema, that the groom is exempt from reciting the Keriat Shema. You yourself taught us this. What's the matter sometimes? The rabbis tell us how we're supposed to behave, and then they go off and they do things completely different. What's going on? Omar lahim, he answered them. He said to them, Eini shomea lachem, I'm not going to listen to you, he said. Levatel heimeni, to cancel out, to nullify from myself, Malkut Shamayim, the kingdom of heaven, afilu sha'achas, even for one moment. Now, Rabban Gamliel's life was about connecting to God, Torah, Mitzvot. Now he gets married. He has to focus his attention on his wife. It's a very difficult thing for somebody of the stature of Rabban Gamliel. He says, why should I give up on the mitzvah of Keriat Shema just because I got married? I mean, after all, how long does it really take to say the Keriat Shema? Is it going to really take away from my evening? Don't worry. I'll still be with my wife. We've got a whole night ahead of us. I'll say the Keriat Shema. It will take me 3 minutes. And then we'll continue our night together. So he says, even though it is that the halacha in a general sense is that most men should not recite the Keriat Shema, which of course is not the halacha l'maaseh. This is not the practical halacha. Don't forget, when we're studying the Mishnah and we study the Gemara, we're learning the principles behind the halacha. We're not learning the actual halacha. For that, we need to read the Rambam, we need to read the Shulchan Aruch, and we need to read all the teshuvot, all the shilas and teshuvas that were sent to the various rabbis at various points in time, and we need to really fill ourselves up with all of these different opinions, the Rishonim and the Acharonim, until eventually we know what's the halacha l'maisa, practically. This is not the halacha l'maisa. It's not practical halacha, but in the meantime, it is the source of the halacha. And in its root form as a source, it seems to be that the chatan should not recite the Keriat Shema in the evening of that night that he gets married because of various things, and he's fulfilling a mitzvah and so on and so forth. But Rabban Gamliel, he didn't listen to his own advice because he says, I'm sorry, I'm not listening to you. For me, I cannot give up on connecting with God even for a moment. And therefore, you're telling me to do away with something that feels so close to me. You're destroying my life. Let's see what it says here. Some points here. A groom is exempt from the recitation of Shema until Saturday night. In the beginning of Tractate Ketubos, the Gemara cites several reasons for the halacha in the Mishnah that a virgin bride's wedding was held on Wednesday. One, from a legal perspective, is that in the event that it was discovered she was not a virgin, he could go early the next morning and make his case before the court, which convened on Thursdays. Another reason for holding the wedding on Wednesday is because the blessing to be fruitful and multiply was given on the 5th day of creation, which began Wednesday night, meaning that's the 5th day, begins already in the nighttime. And we learned over here regarding the recitation of the Keriat Shema on top of an olive tree or a fig tree. We're going to see more about this. We'll see more about it as we get into the Gemara, and then we'll go back to the notes. Okay. Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan. Let's just do these halachot at the bottom. Sorry, I didn't see these halachot here. So we can just get an idea of what's actually going on, practically speaking, from all the different things that we learned about before. If one recited the Shema and erred and does not know where he erred, one who erred in the recitation of Shema but does not know where he erred returns to the beginning of the paragraph. If he's uncertain which paragraph he was reciting, he returns to the beginning of the first paragraph. If he was reciting the verse, and you shall write them, and is uncertain whether it is that verse in the first paragraph or the one in the second paragraph that he is reciting, he returns to the first. If he began reciting the verse in order to lengthen your days, he continues from there as per the Breita and in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. And as you see over here, if you're following our discussion together, we see he's quoting the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. These are two of the greatest sources of authority in practical halacha for today. And therefore, once we're learning the Gemara, we learn into those sources as well. We learn out of those sources what we need to do today. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a Tosefta, Ha'umanim, laborers, Koren Barosh Ha'ilan, they read the Keriat Shema at the top of a tree, or Barosh HaNidbach, on the top of a wall, stone wall, whatever, concrete wall, whatever it is that they're working on. Umit Palalin Barosh HaZayit, and they may daven also, that means Shmona Esrei, they may daven at the top of an olive tree, or Barosh HaTe'ina, and they may also daven on the top of a fig tree. But we learned in the Mishnah, when it comes to tefillah, one does not daven on the top of the tree. Therefore, why does the Gemara say he may daven the Shmona Esrei on the top of an olive tree and on the top of a fig tree? If you read the note over here, which is brought down, it helps us to understand what's really happening. It says those trees have many branches close together, so one could stand on them and focus properly while praying. Ush'ar kol ha'ilanot, when it comes to other trees, yordin lamata umispalalim, one should descend downwards, and one should pray there. Because, of course, if you're going to stand in the tree and the branches are thin, the next thing you know, the branch snaps, and well, that's the end of that. There won't be any work for the rest of the day. Or balabayit. Now, if we're talking about the balabayit, the fellow who owns the trees, it's his actual wall, it's his trees, ben kach or ben kach, whether this or whether that, nobody cares. Yored lemato mitpalel, he must descend and daven. Which means to say, if he's the owner, what's the difference if he's the owner or not? Because his mind will not be able to be relaxed and to sit nicely for him. Now, what's the difference between the workers and the owner? The difference is that the workers have a job to do, and they get paid for the job that they do. But they have mitzvahs that they have to do to Hashem also. They've got to read the Keriat Shema, they've got to daven. The things to do to connect with Hashem, mitzvahs to be done. Now he's working. He needs to fulfill the mitzvah of saying Keriat Shema. Why does he not descend as a worker, but as a owner of the tree, he should descend, or at least for davening. At the very least, he needs to come down for davening. If not for Keriat Shema, he needs to come down for davening. The reason is because as a worker, he should not delay himself from the work that he's doing for his boss. If he comes down the tree, then what's going to happen? He's going to waste time. Climb down the tree, climb up the tree, waste time. When a person is employed by somebody to do a job, the person says, I will give you 3 shekels an hour to do this job, then the person has been employed for 3 shekels an hour. If a person feels that 3 shekels is not worth his bother, then don't take the job. Because unfortunately, being paid the 3 shekels for the hour means, practically speaking, that one becomes the servant of the employer for the full 60 minutes of the hour. And the boss can tell him, jump up and down, go up the tree, go down the tree, whatever he needs to do. But if the person takes off that time and he goes and he does other things meanwhile, then even though he's only being paid 3 shekels an hour, and as far as he's concerned, he's never going to be able to afford a house in his lifetime, even if he lives 100 lifetimes and he never sleeps or drinks, eats, or does any transport or speaks to anybody, because he'll be earning the 3 shekels an hour. He's got many lifetimes to go through in order to earn a house. And he says to himself, well, if that's the case, I'm not going to give my full effort in. He's not allowed to do that, because the boss is paying him the 3 shekels for the hour, and he owns him, so to speak, for that hour period. Therefore, as the worker, he must daven if he is inside the fig tree or is inside an olive tree. He davens where he is so as not to waste the time to come down. And of course, for Keriat Shema, he also recites where he is so that he doesn't have to come down and waste time going down and going up. That's a waste of the money of the employer. But the employer himself, since it is his tree or his wall, he must certainly descend because he is not losing out on any parnasa and he is not causing a loss to any boss because he is the one who is working for the boss. And therefore, he is not exempt. He must come down, even if he could concentrate in the tree, even if it was easier for him in the tree. Nobody cares. He must come down and daven as is required, as he should be doing. Let's take a look at these points on the side. Notes. Atop the olive tree or the fig tree. According to the Jerusalem Talmud, this is because these trees have numerous branches, which make it particularly difficult to climb up and down and tend to them. Furthermore, there is concern lest the branches will break due to the numerous climbs. So, of course, as a worker, he wants to cause the least damage that he could possibly do, and therefore he stays in the tree when he davens Shemona Esrei. But the person who owns the tree, it's his tree, and the correct thing to do is to daven on the ground, of course, not in the tree, and he should do so. The homeowner, in all cases, must climb down. Some explain that this is because the homeowner is less accustomed to being up in a tree, and his fear will prevent him from praying with the proper intent. Interesting. Not exactly what I said, but certainly what I said has validity. It is no less important to appreciate that as for the homeowner, there is no reason whatsoever that he would be considered to be wasting time of the employer because he, of course, is the employer. Let us take a look at the halacha. Laborers may recite atop the tree. One who was performing labor atop a tree or engaged in a construction of a course of stones atop a wall may recite Shema there. No distinction is made between laborer and homeowner in this case, as no such distinction appears in the Gemara. So that is the halacha. Therefore, as for the Keriat Shema, there both the homeowner and the laborer may recite and should recite the Keriat Shema. There is no distinction between the two. A groom is exempt from the recitation of Shema, Chatan Patur mi Keriat Shema, based on the ruling in the Mishnah. A groom is exempt from reciting Shema on his wedding night and 3 days thereafter, as long as he did not consummate his marriage. Today, because even under normal circumstances, one is incapable of achieving the appropriate level of intent when in reciting Shema, even a groom is obligated to recite it. Brought down there in the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, and so is the Halacha Lemai. So that, of course, is the practical Halacha. And they pray atop the olive tree or the fig tree. Laborers engaged in labor for a homeowner at the top of a fig tree or an olive tree may pray there, but they may not pray atop other types of trees. A homeowner, however, must always climb down the tree as per the Tosefta, as we see brought down here in the Gemara. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We're in the middle of this discussion. Really, it's a story as well as an insight into the halacha of Keriat Shema, talking about workers, working, and the activities that go on. So we'll continue this in our next shiur. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet, broadcasting from the holy city of Yerushalayim. You can find my site, www.lovingkindness.co. Hope you've enjoyed this shiur. If you have, I'd appreciate it if you'd like my video by clicking on the thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and feel free to be in touch with me in the future by simply visiting my site and sending me an email via the contact form on any subject that you wish to. I'd be delighted to be in touch with you. Life, Torah, growth, these are the things that are closest to me, and I'd be delighted to be in touch with you about all of these subjects. Don't forget, if you'd like to, please share a comment below, and I'd be happy to respond and be in touch. Until next time, I look forward to another shiur very soon, and I wish you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.